All right. Hello. I am back with some exciting, or maybe not so exciting, DC, Flash, Batman, Superman news, all that crazy stuff. There was a test screening for the Flash already, and so the leaks have started coming out now. I should say that these are unverified and should be taken with a grain of salt. However, there's also potential that they're all 100% true. We just don't know. In any case, they're interesting enough to discuss regularly. So, I mean, why don't we just hop into it, whether it's true or not? But you should be warned potential spoilers ahead and definite spoilers for the previous movies in the DC universe. If you're not caught up, then I would recommend clicking away. But if you are or just don't care, then, well, let's just get to it, shall we? So this is all going to be from Reddit, pretty much. So I'm going to thank DCEU Leaks, and uh, there's going to be a couple different names on here. We'll see. So the credit would all go to them for finding all this. Now I'm just pretty much going to read it straight. This is the one I read yesterday, and then there's one more that is a little newer that we're going to also take a look at. So let's just hop right in. Um, Essentially, that this does not come directly from the test screening attendee, but someone who has received information from an attendee. So it should go without saying that everything is subject to change in future test screenings, not to mention by the time we get to the final cut. And as we know with DC movies especially, but superhero movies, there's a lot of changes last minute, director's cuts. I mean, there's so much that is up in the air, but at the end of the day, there's still some interesting points here I want to take a look at. So, the original source has reached out to clarify some elements. Uh, Relevant edits have been made below. And then to clear up some confusion, Bat Keaton and Supergirl die in the Burtonverse timeline, to use a phrase. But they are alive in the new DCEU, which Barry creates at the end of the film. If you want to understand the multiple DCEUs, I encourage you to read this explainer from this other user here, which I was the other thing that I said I wanted to take a look at. So, the DCEU one is this is the one we watched in the past decade, currently set in 2023, a decade after the events of Man of Steel. DCEU and Superman and Batman exist in this timeline and are active as superheroes. The Supergirl of this universe is presumably dead, much like Robin. So that's pretty much what we've been seeing. There's little nods to Supergirl and Robin here and there, but they're pretty much both dead. There's a chance Jason Todd is alive in this universe, but we just don't know. And there's no actual proof of that. So that's just a kind of my theory. Zack Snyder's Justice League's canonical version of Justice League in this timeline. There's two nods. First is that Iris recognizes Barry from his introduction scene, and she also, or yeah, Flash also saved the world with time travel, and Batman will mention that. So this is going to be confirming that the Snyderverse is going to be the proper canon going forward, which I love to hear. The Flash goes back in time to investigate the cause of his mother's death, but it is unable to prevent her death, her demise. No matter what he tries, Reverse Flash cameos at some point during the sequence over her dead body, confirming that he's the killer. Actor playing him is not identified, but he has glowing red eyes, smiles creepily at the Flash, and then charges to attack him before the Flash narrowly escapes. Eobard Thawne is name dropped late into the film, a plot thread that will likely be explored in follow-ups, which pretty much confirms there's Flash 2, Flash 3, or maybe some Justice League. In any case, it's interesting that Reverse Flash is in this movie for sure, or well, not for sure, but for sure according to this. At some point in Act 1, the Flash is knocked out of this universe by another speedster when he uses the Speed Force to time travel, and this is how he enters DCEU 2. The Flash apparently treated as native to DCEU 3 at the end of the movie, despite coming from DCEU 1. The post-credits scene with Batman contacting the Flash establishes that DCEU 1 still exists and is currently flashless as far as we can tell. So the universe doesn't get destroyed or meshed with another one. Flash simply leaves it. So that also leaves a possibility open for Batman and Superman, Wonder Woman, all of them to continue on doing their Snyderverse. It is just a little sad that there wouldn't be a Flash or a Barry after that. Now, I will say that that is kind of hard to believe that they wouldn't have a Flash in an entire DC universe. But there is a couple possibilities. There's Grant Gustins who could come over. They can introduce a Wally West. There's a bunch of stuff they could do. But that seems like it's going to be DCEU 1, which is what we have now, the Snyderverse. DCEU 2 is a version of the Burtonverse, but one that has lots of DCEU elements after the events of the two canonical Batman movies. Basically, imagine if the Burtonverse continued all the way to 2013 and some other superhero existed in the timeline. Aside from the main bat suit, this Batman also has a set of powered armor that looks like the one seen in Kingdom Come comic book, which is really cool. If we're going to see Michael Keaton actually whip that out, that's pretty awesome. I'm all for that. DCEU 1 Flash initially loses his powers and has to team up with DCEU 2 Flash in order to get them back, which they enlist Batman's help for. Batman electrocutes DCEU 1 Flash in a Frankenstein-like way that's similar to what happens in Flashpoint after he gets his powers back. They then go out to find Superman for further assistance, but ultimately they find Supergirl instead, the government facility. The movie is set around the time of Zod's invasion of Man of Steel, but it is later revealed that Zod and Faora killed Superman of this universe as an infant. So that's kind of weird. Superman is already dead. I don't really understand how Zod would kill an infant Kryptonian, especially since his whole MO really is saving Kryptonians, Kryptonian supremacy. So it kind of seems weird. I feel like he would be more likely to take Superman and raise him as his own killing machine, but I guess I'll be along for the ride regardless. As far as I can tell, only the Flash, Batman, and Supergirl exist as superheroes in this timeline. Wonder Woman explicitly does not exist because the Flash seeing an image of her on a truck when he gets to DCU 3 is a sign that makes him think he's back at home at the end of the film. Although we learn he's not in the DCEU 1. Which is, we're going to get to that in a minute, DCU 3. Things get really bad, so both universes' Flashes repeatedly use time travel to try to fix things and ultimately fail. During this set of events, the alternate version of DCEU 2 Flash appears and becomes Future Flash, who ends up being the main antagonist of the film. The Future Flash is apparently one that knocked Flash out of his initial timeline earlier in the film, an attempt to kill him. Since he blames DCEU 1 Flash for what's happened, the clash between Future Flash and DCEU 1 Flash and DCEU 2 Flash makes up the conflict in Act 3. So it looks like DCEU 1 Flash and DCEU 2 Flash versus a later version of DCEU 2 Flash. So one of the Flashes is going to be fighting himself, apparently. After the conflict is resolved, DCEU 3 appears. By the end of the film, DCEU 2 does not matter to the greater multiversal story, while DCEU 1 still does. Don't really know what that means, don't know why that would happen, but it maybe gets destroyed, maybe gets knocked out of the timeline. I really don't know what that means. It's kind of left ambiguous, but we'll get to a little more on the fates of those characters back at the original post. So DCEU 3, the new DCEU, appears to be set in 2023 and closely resembles the DCEU 1. The Flash initially thinks that he's home, and he learns that thanks to Bruce Wayne, new evidence exonerated his father for the crime of his mother's murder. However, when he goes to court with the trials being held, he finds DCEU 2 Batman and Supergirl are in the universe, and that they apparently remember him. So Zod and Faora are somehow still alive, apparently, which means no Doomsday Zod, which means that the events of Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice and Zack Snyder's Justice League do not happen in this timeline. It's not clear if the events similar to Man of Steel happen in this timeline, but the fact that the world is still in a decent state compared to the future of DCEU 2 indicates to be the contrary. So essentially, he thinks he's home until he runs into Michael Keaton and Sasha Calle, Supergirl, instead of Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill, and that a little confuses him. So that pretty much erases the Snyderverse right there. So it looks like there's going to be two separate DC universes, one with Snyderverse and one without. Superman's fate in this universe is left unclear, only to be discussed in the mid-credit scene, but it does not seem like his appearance in this universe is off the table. One description that's out there is that the Flash asking Aquaman about Superman after the film, which we'll get to that later, uh, he does not recognize him by name. Another description, apparently from the same source who provided the first description, states that Supergirl is planning in search of whereabouts for her cousin in this new universe. The door appears to be open for some version of Superman to appear, but he's not an active superhero and he doesn't really have any recognition. Or he's just been missing. And this is just the author of this is speculating in this next point, but it doesn't appear that the Justice League exists in this universe and that the superheroes exist in their own right. They don't have a team formed, and that this kind of seems like they're setting it up down the road for a new Justice League eventually. There will be a new main DCU for the time being in DCU 3. And it's kind of going to be a soft reboot that'll set the stage for a bigger reboot down the road for the Crisis movie, which has been a rumor for a long time that the Crisis is going to kind of change the landscape of the DC universe. Let's see, where were we here? It seems DC wants to streamline a lot of their content into one setting in the long run. So that looks like it's going to be DCEU 3. Judging by the set and prop leaks tied to Batgirl, Penguin, Robin, and Nightwing are alive. Lois Lane is writing for the Daily Planet, and Vicky Vale is apparently retired or close to retiring. The Court of Owls exist and are known to tabloids. Lex Luthor apparently went to prison for bombing the United States Capitol like Batman vs. Superman, but is being transferred from Arkham Asylum to Belle Reve instead of escaping and hiring Deathstroke. There were other universes that will appear. They're not as important to the story, and they'll just establish the presence of a multiverse with a lot of cool cameos. There are a lot of things we don't know. This movie seems to be really respectful of what has come before it, with putting a strange new spin on the material, including Zack Snyder stuff. A giant chunk of the plot is basically a what-if version of Man of Steel. I'll note that this is all from the test screening and that it's subject to change, and there's a lot here basically that just retreads what I've already said, that it should be taken with a grain of salt. There's a lot of contradicting evidence, like Zachary Levi filmed a scene with Shazam for the movie, but he isn't in the cut that was screened, so there's obviously stuff that could still change. But essentially that establishes so that we know now that there are 3 different DC universes that are going to be going forward. 3 main ones at least, while there is a multiverse. DCEU 2 doesn't really matter. That's the Burtonverse that we've seen, that we grew up with. Then we've got the DCEU 1, which seems like it's going to get erased or sidelined for the time being. Plus DCEU 3, which seems like the direction they're going to stick with. So now that we know all that and we have a little bit of a roadmap, we can hop back to this first one. There's 100% tease for Reverse Flash when Barry's mom's killed. There's not an actor or voice, but it's got yellow arm and red eyes, so it just kind of is a little cameo, setting him up to possibly come back later, opening the door for a Flash 2. They say Ezra has really good chemistry with his mother, and people started crying when he realized he couldn't save her, so it's really, really, really well done, apparently. Black Flash is not really the villain of the film. It is Future Flash with Black Flash's suit, so they kind of meshed 2 villains together. And there are 3 Barrys in the film. Essentially, from what I understand, there's going to be our DCEU 1 Barry, the one we know, who travels to DCEU 2, meets DCEU 2 Barry, and then from there, they discover DCU 2 Barry's future self, who is going to be the antagonist. So there's going to be 3 Flashes, one of which is going to be 2 different versions of the same Flash. Essentially, his world was destroyed by what they are doing in this film, from what I can gather. So Future Flash comes back to stop these 2 Flashes from what they're doing. It's 10 years in the future, apparently, so this Future Flash, Black Flash, whatever we're calling him, is going to be a older Barry than the other two. Sasha Calle Supergirl is one of the best parts of the movie, with some calling it the best performance in the movie. As we know from the other post, essentially she's going to be locked up by the U.S. government after crashing somewhere besides Smallville, and she's essentially going to be held in a prison. I've heard that it's possibly that they're going to have a kryptonite prison instead of a red sun prison, but I don't know where they'd be able to get that much kryptonite, but I suppose we'll see. They don't really mention that in this post from what I remember. Our Barry, Barry 1, got stuck in Keaton's world and finds Barry 2, who has Flash powers, and they both try to get Michael Keaton's Batman and Supergirl to help fight a threat, potentially Zod. They lose. Barry 1 and 2 try to reverse time to save the universe, but it fails. Barry 1 gives up, but Barry 2 doesn't. That's when Future Flash, the older version of Barry 2, appears, revealing that he tried to repeat time multiple times, but it failed. So instead of repeating time to stop this incident, he enters the Speed Force to try to kill the person who caused this in the first place. Barry 1. So it's pretty convoluted. We don't know how true any of this is, but it sounds like it's going to be flash on flash on flash action. Don't really know how messy that can get, but it seems kind of like a Spider-Man thing going on here, but with a lot more time travel as opposed to minimal time travel, and then they're all in one universe. It seems like they're going to be doing a lot of traveling between multiverse or universes. Zod successfully kills Keaton's Batman and Supergirl. Supergirl gets her neck snapped. It's actually pretty fucking brutal. Worse than when Superman snapped Zod. So pretty much confirms those two deaths from we saw earlier before they traveled to DCEU 3. So it looks like our Burtonverse Batman's actually going to die, which makes me kind of sad. But, he is 70 years old, so at least he goes out being a hero, one can hope. Zod kills Cavill's Superman as a baby, which making the killing Super Baby leak 100% true. Unfortunate, but it is only DCEU 2, so there's still potential for him to show up in DCEU 3 and 1. Michael Shannon reprises his role as Zod. Great, didn't want to recast there. Cage is not Superman from Keaton's world, it's Cavill, before he got killed as a baby by Zod. So they pretty much erase any potential for Superman Lives. Would have kind of been cool to see a little cameo with Nick Cage just in the Superman suit, even if it was just for a second, but that's pretty much done and dead and buried now. Future Flash and Flash have a massive race because Future Flash wants to kill him. Barry doesn't want to die. When they do that, they travel into the multiverse. We see a shitload of different universes. Pattinson's Batman, Linda Carter's Wonder Woman, Adam West's Batman, Grant Gustin's Flash. A lot of different stuff there. I wonder if we're going to see the Nolanverse, maybe some animated stuff even. There's a lot of potential for some cool cameos there, like Nick Cage, for example, but, I'm going to leave that alone now. I won't bring him up again. Any film and TV show, including Peacemaker, released between Man of Steel and Shazam 2, which has not come out yet, are set in the old timeline, which is going to be DCEU 1. Shazam 2 is set in the old timeline. Everything after The Flash is set in the new timeline. And they put some examples here: Green Lantern, Zatanna, and Batgirl. So those look like those are all three going to be in DCEU 3, which I suppose makes a little more sense, I guess. Iris is only a cameo, and she appears at the end when Barry's father is released from prison. I assume that that's the nod to when he saved her, they were saying in the other post, which adds up. And Warner's Brothers' plan is to use Keaton as a temporary replacement for DCU Batman. After Crisis, which they're leading up to, Pattinson will be the new DCU Batman. That portion, however, is crossed out, and they now said that they know that Pattinson will be involved in Crisis, but they don't know if he'll join the DCEU full-time, and they hope not. I feel like overall this film will not be beloved by general audiences, but hardcore Flash fans as well. So it sounds like they have a positive feeling after the fact, which is good. I don't really want them to sit there and say the movie sucked. Batfleck doesn't die, but isn't part of the new timeline. That's great, but it pretty much solidifies what we saw earlier, that Snyderverse stays in DCEU 1, while Keaton is going to be the new Batman in DCEU 2. And post-credit, we got an Affleck Crisis tease. Come find us, Barry. I don't really know what an Affleck crisis tease could be, but it would be very, very interesting to see like all the Batman together one time, one single time. That's all I want. And a less credible regarding Ezra Miller's legal troubles. I'm not really going to get into those at the moment because I don't think that's pretty likely. But there's a rumor he may get recast. They even say right on here less credible. Sam Claflin is someone you can expect to be the new Barry Allen or Flash. I don't really buy that. I don't think they're going to recast him. And if they did, I think it would be a serious, serious mistake. I don't even know who this guy is. Thought these were interesting at the very least. Again, take them with a grain of salt. And this is going to be probably pretty inaccurate when push comes to shove, especially when movies are leaked like this. They tend to want to change it, especially because of that. And so essentially, if you guys want to check it out, just hop on Reddit like I did and just look up Flash Leak. That's literally all I did. And it's everywhere. People are either pretty pissed, pretty indifferent, or pretty mad. Why don't you guys let me know in the comments where you land? Hey, that was pretty good. I didn't even mean to do that. But anyway, thank you guys for coming by. That's pretty much it.